It was the night a decorated combat veteran finally forced a reckoning for the most controversial radical in the United States Congress. If you have ever felt like our leaders in Washington hate the very country they represent, you cannot afford to turn away from this screen. Tonight, we are pulling back the curtain on the moment Ilhan Omar's career met its absolute end at the hands of Tulsi Gabbard. I promise you that by the time we reach the final minute of this showdown, you will see the exact moment the masks fell off and the truth about Omar's loyalty was laid bare for the entire world to see. Stay with us until the end, because what happened at minute 52 will change your perspective on Washington corruption forever. The Fox News studio was packed with 200 people, a crowd split between flag-waving patriots and those sporting the merchandise of the radical squad. Martha McCallum sat as the moderator, ready for a debate on immigration, but she had no idea the room was about to become a battlefield. Behind the scenes, the contrast between the two women couldn't have been more telling of their character. Ilhan Omar's green room was a hive of crisis consultants and communication directors, all busy rehearsing how to use accusations of Islamophobia as a shield against any criticism. Meanwhile, Tulsi Gabbard sat in silence, armed only with her iPad and the discipline of a soldier who had spent 20 years in uniform. When the lights went up, the optics alone told the story of two different Americas. Omar walked out in designer clothing that cost more than most of you pay for a month of rent, wearing the smirk of a politician who thought she was untouchable. She was followed by Gabbard, a lieutenant colonel who walked with the precision of someone who had faced enemy fire and lived to tell the tale. Tulsi wasn't there for a polite policy discussion. She was there to bring the receipts that Omar thought were buried in the archives of Minnesota and Somalia. The atmosphere was electric, and as the first question was asked, the typical radical playbook was immediately deployed. Omar didn't wait for a policy debate. She went straight for the jugular with a smear that would make any veteran's blood boil. She looked directly at a woman who had saved lives in a medical unit in Iraq and called her an Islamophobic war criminal on live television. The studio went dead silent as the weight of that insult hung in the air. It was a bold move, but as any warrior will tell you, exposing your position before you know your enemy's strength is a fatal mistake. Gabbard didn't flinch because she knew that Omar had just walked right into the trap she had meticulously set. Tulsi leaned in, her voice like steel, and reminded the audience that while Omar was playing the victim, she was minimizing the darkest day in American history. She cued the footage, and there it was. Ilhan Omar at a care event, casually describing the 9/11 attacks as a moment where some people did something. The dismissive shrug on the screen was a slap in the face to every family who lost a loved one in the Twin Towers. Tulsi didn't let her off the hook, demanding to know how a refugee who was given everything by this country could be so callous about the murder of 3,000 Americans. As the tension reaches a breaking point, we need to make sure this message reaches every patriot in this country. If you believe that our veterans deserve respect and that the truth must be told, please hit that subscribe button right now and join our community. Your support ensures that the voices of those who served are never silenced by radical rhetoric. Comment below with the word "the oath" if you stand with our troops against those who would minimize our history. We are just getting started, and you won't believe the documentation Tulsi pulls out next. Omar tried to pivot, claiming her words were taken out of context, but Gabbard was already on to the next set of facts. She pulled up Omar's own social media history, a greatest hits collection of vile anti-Semitic tropes that had even her own party voting to condemn her. From claims that Israel had hypnotized the world to saying support for our ally was all about the Benjamins, the evidence was undeniable. Tulsi asked a simple, cutting question. If she had said those things about any other group, she would be called a racist. So why does Omar get a pass? Omar's face began to flush as she realized her usual defense of crying bigotry wasn't working against someone who had served alongside Muslims in combat. Then came the moment that drained the color from Ilhan Omar's face entirely. The mention of Amma Noor Said Elmi. Tulsi didn't just bring up rumors. She brought a timeline of marriages, tax filings, and school records that suggested a massive con. She laid out the evidence that Omar had married her own brother to commit immigration fraud and then lied about it for years. The crowd gasped as photos of the two as children in Somalia appeared on the screen, matching records that Omar had tried to delete from the internet. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was a question of whether a sitting member of Congress had gamed the very system she now wants to dismantle. Gabbard pushed harder, demanding a DNA test or the release of birth certificates to prove the allegations false, but Omar sat in a stunned, guilty silence. Beyond the marriage scandal, Tulsi produced the documentation of Omar's $3,400 fine for filing fraudulent tax returns. She pointed out the hypocrisy of a woman who lectures Americans about open borders while potentially manipulating her own path to citizenship. The narrative of the brave refugee was crumbling under the weight of official Minnesota state documents and FEC reports. The corruption didn't stop at immigration, as Tulsi moved into the $2.8 million problem involving Omar's current husband, Tim Minot. She showed the FEC filings where Omar had funneled millions of campaign donor dollars into Minot's consulting firm. Even more scandalous was the timeline showing the payments began while both were still married to other people and reportedly engaged in an affair. Tulsi looked at the camera and spoke for every hard-working American who had sent in a $20 donation. She exposed that their money wasn't going toward a cause, but into the pockets of Omar's own family. The silence in that studio after the financial records were displayed was a heavy, suffocating thing for the radical left. Tulsi Gabbard didn't stop there, because she knew that a politician who plays fast and loose with the truth about money is likely doing the same with their allegiance to this country. She queued up the next video, and the screen filled with Omar's own image using air quotes while discussing Al-Qaeda. For any American who remembers the smoke rising from the Pentagon or the fields of Pennsylvania, seeing a United States representative treat a terrorist organization like a mere suggestion is a betrayal of the highest order. Tulsi walked toward Omar's podium, her presence commanding the room, and asked how anyone who takes an oath to defend this nation could be so dismissive of those who seek to destroy it. Omar's response was a stuttering mess of academic jargon, trying to claim she was providing nuance to Western imperialism. But our veterans don't care about nuance when they are facing IEDs and sniper fire from the very groups Omar was defending with her fingers in the air. Tulsi pointed out that this wasn't an isolated incident but a consistent pattern of behavior. She reminded the audience of Omar's trip to Somalia, where she told crowds to ask what country they were from, identifying as Somali first and American second. This is the heart of the issue for every patriot watching. We expect our representatives to have an undivided heart for the United States. You cannot lead a country you spend every waking moment resenting, and Tulsi made sure the point was driven home with the force of a sledgehammer. As we witness this historic takedown of radicalism, it is more important than ever to stay informed with the facts the mainstream media refuses to show you. If you are tired of the double standards in Washington and want to see more leaders held accountable, please take a second to comment the truth below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so we can continue to bring you the stories that define our national identity. Your engagement is the only way we beat the algorithms that try to hide these truths from the American people. We are heading into the final confrontation now, and you do not want to miss how Omar's supporters reacted when the evidence became too much to ignore. Tulsi then challenged Omar to name just one instance where she had praised America without a caveat or a but attached to it. The silence that followed was excruciating, lasting several seconds that felt like hours on national television. Omar searched her memory, her eyes darting around the room, but she couldn't find a single positive thing to say about the nation that gave her refuge, education, and power. Tulsi didn't have to say a word. The silence told the story of a woman who benefits from America's greatness while loathing its foundation. To prove the point, Gabbard played a compilation of Omar's speeches where she called America an empire built on genocide and stolen land. It was a mirror held up to Omar's soul, and the reflection was one of pure, unadulterated grievance. The debate then shifted to the comparison between the country Omar fled and the one she now criticizes every day. Tulsi displayed the statistics on the screen: the GDP, the life expectancy, and the basic human rights that exist here but are non-existent in Somalia. She asked the question that every one of you has asked at your kitchen table. If America is so evil, why did you come here? And why do you stay? She pointed out that Omar wouldn't have the freedom to speak, let alone serve in government, in the very places she refuses to criticize. This is the ultimate hypocrisy of the radical left. They use the freedoms of our republic to try and tear it down from within. Martha McCallum tried to wrap up the segment, but the momentum was entirely with the combat veteran. Tulsi stood in the center of the stage and did something that left the radicals in the front row trembling. She recited the oath of office from memory. Every word about defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, echoed through the hall. She then systematically walked through every violation Omar had committed against that sacred vow. From minimizing 9/11s to funneling millions to her family, Tulsi showed that Omar hadn't just failed her constituents. She had betrayed the very document she swore to uphold. It was a masterclass in accountability that we rarely see in the halls of Congress today. The aftermath of this debate was a political earthquake that is still shaking the foundations of the Democratic Party. Within hours, the footage had reached over 100 million views across every platform imaginable. The hashtag Omar Exposed was trending as patriots from all walks of life realized that the victimhood narrative had finally met its match in documented facts. Even the liberal mouthpieces at CNN and MSNBC couldn't spin this one, as their own audiences started asking why they had protected a person with such a documented history of corruption and anti-American sentiment. The walls were finally closing in on the most radical member of the squad. The final blow came when Omar's own district started to turn on her, with polling showing her approval numbers cratering in a matter of days. A primary challenger, a Somali-American Marine veteran, stepped forward to say what we all knew: you can love your heritage while being 100% loyal to the American flag. This is the future of our country patriots who understand that service means sacrifice, not self-enrichment. As Omar's office went into a silent panic, the rest of the country celebrated a moment where the truth was finally loud enough to drown out the screams of bigotry. If you believe that the oath of office should mean something, and that no politician is above the law, make sure you have subscribed and hit that notification bell. We need you in this fight to restore integrity to our government. Comment below with whose side, to let us know you stand with Tulsi Gabbard and every veteran who has ever defended our shores. Share this video with one friend who needs to see the facts about what is really happening in Washington. Together, we can ensure that the next generation of leaders actually loves the country they're sworn to serve. The fallout from that stage didn't just stay on social media. It marched straight into the halls of the Longworth House office building. Within 72 hours of Tulsi's relentless presentation, 3 separate ethics complaints were filed, hitting Omar with the force of a legal tidal wave. It wasn't just Republicans leading the charge this time. Even a group of brave Americans calling themselves progressive Muslims for accountability stepped forward. They made it clear that being a Muslim woman of color does not give anyone a free pass to commit tax fraud, spread anti-Semitism, or violate the trust of the American people. The House Ethics Committee, normally a place where scandals go to die, found itself under such immense public pressure that it had no choice but to launch a formal investigation into the marriage and campaign finance allegations. Back in Minnesota, the ground was shifting beneath Omar's feet as state investigators officially reopened their examination of her immigration and tax records. Those marriage allegations involving Ahmed Narset Elmi, which the mainstream media had spent years calling a conspiracy theory, were suddenly being treated with the seriousness of a federal crime. For the first time in her career, the identity shield had shattered, and Omar was left standing alone against a mountain of documented evidence. The public was finally seeing the difference between a political narrative and a sworn affidavit. It turns out that when you provide the receipts, the rhetoric of victimhood simply evaporates. As we watch the swamp finally being drained in this specific case, we have to ask ourselves, how many more are hiding behind these same tactics? If you believe that every member of Congress should be subject to the same laws as you and me, then we need you to join this movement. Please hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss an update on this developing investigation. Comment down below with the word accountability if you want to see the House Ethics Committee finish what Tulsi Gabbard started. Your voice is the only thing that keeps these politicians from sweeping their scandals under the rug. We are now entering the phase where Omar's own allies began to jump ship, and the details are absolutely shocking. The silence from the Democratic leadership in Washington was perhaps the most damning evidence of all. Hakeem Jeffries, when pressed by reporters, offered a cold and terse response, stating that every member is responsible for their own words. Nancy Pelosi, usually the first to defend her caucus, said absolutely nothing, signaling to the world that the toxic asset known as Ilhan Omar was being cut loose. Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the radical left. Omar was being stripped of her seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. They called it a reorganization, but everyone in the Beltway knew she was being purged because she had become a liability that no one could defend anymore. Even the squad found their defense of her to be a losing battle. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib tried to tweet their support, they were met with a firestorm of ratioing from their own followers. People were no longer interested in hearing that a debate was a racist hit job when they had seen the video of Omar making air quotes about Al-Qaeda with their own eyes. The American public had reached a breaking point where they valued the safety of the country over the progressive branding of a politician. It was a moment of national clarity that proved facts are still the most powerful weapon in our political arsenal. The cultural impact of Tulsi's stand reached far beyond the Beltway and into the heart of our veteran communities. VFW posts and American Legion halls across this great nation held Thank You Tulsi events, playing the debate on loop for men and women who have actually bled for that flag. For decades, these heroes had watched as radicals in Washington insulted their service, but finally, someone had stood up and demanded respect. Jewish organizations also joined the chorus of praise, thanking Gabbard for having the courage to call out the anti-Semitic rot that had been allowed to fester in the halls of Congress. It was a rare moment of unity between diverse groups who all agreed on one thing: loyalty to America comes first. As the pressure reached a boiling point, even the legacy media outlets like 60 Minutes could no longer ignore the stench of corruption. They ran a devastating investigative special that confirmed much of what Tulsi had presented on that Fox News stage. They interviewed the investigators and reviewed the birth records, concluding that the evidence of marriage fraud was substantial and undeniable. Omar was trapped in a cage of her own making, with no way to deflect and no one left to hide behind. The woman who once thought she was the future of the Democratic Party was now looking at a future that likely involved a courtroom rather than a committee room. The walls finally collapsed on the morning Ilhan Omar walked toward a podium for the last time as a viable political figure. 1 month after the debate that shook the world, she held a press conference to announce she would not seek re-election in 2026. She tried to frame it as a personal choice to focus on her family, but the American people knew better. They knew she had been forced out by the weight of her own documented lies. The woman who once lectured us on morality stood there with her head held high. Yet the shadow of marriage fraud and campaign finance corruption followed her every word. It was the ultimate victory for truth over narrative, a moment where the victimhood shield finally failed to stop the arrows of accountability. As Omar faded into political irrelevance, Tulsi Gabbard rose like a phoenix as a national hero to millions. Her approval ratings skyrocketed, especially among veterans and independents who were hungry for a leader who actually loves the country they serve. She was invited to every university, podcast, and town hall in the country to talk about what it means to honor the oath of office. Tulsi showed us that you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be grateful for the opportunities this nation provides. She became the voice for the silent majority who were tired of seeing their flag burned and their history erased by people who benefit from our freedoms. This entire saga has changed American political discourse forever by proving that documentation defeats deflection every single time. We learned that when you confront radicalism with its own words and official government records, the accusations of bigotry lose their power. This wasn't about Republican versus Democrat. It was about the fundamental requirement of loyalty to the United States. We ask our representatives to swear a sacred oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Ilhan Omar mocked that oath every time she minimized terrorism and identified as Somali first. If you believe that America is still the greatest nation on earth and that our leaders should be its biggest defenders, then you are in the right place. Please make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button to help us spread this message of patriotism and truth. Comment the word "the oath" one last time to show your support for every soldier and official who takes their vows seriously. Your engagement helps us fight back against the radical narrative that tries to divide our country. We are standing at a crossroads in our history, and your support is what allows us to keep demanding accountability from Washington. The question Tulsi Gabbard asked on that stage, "Whose side are you on?" remains the most important question in our politics today. It is a question that every refugee who becomes a citizen and every citizen who becomes a representative must be able to answer with their actions. Real service means enlisting when your country is attacked, not enriching your family with campaign donations. It means acknowledging the flaws of our nation while still believing it is worth defending with your life. Tulsi Gabbard gave us a masterclass in what it looks like to be an American first, and it is a lesson we must never forget. In the end, the story of Ilhan Omar is a cautionary tale about the dangers of resentment and the limits of identity politics. You cannot build a career on attacking the country that saved you and expect the people to keep trusting you with power. America is a land of second chances and infinite opportunity, but it is also a land that demands true faith and allegiance. As we move forward, let us look for more leaders who wear the American flag pin with pride and who understand that serving in Congress is a privilege. The era of hiding behind false accusations of bigotry is over. The era of documentation and accountability has begun. The technicalities of financial corruption might seem dry to the casual observer, but for the American taxpayer who watches their hard-earned dollars vanish into the pockets of the political elite, the details of Ilhan Omar's campaign spending are nothing short of criminal. Tulsi Gabbard didn't just mention the millions of dollars. She broke down the specific ways in which the E Street Group, owned by Tim Minot, became a personal ATM for the Omar family. The FEC filings revealed a staggering level of luxury travel and consulting fees that coincided perfectly with the couple's personal romantic timeline. It wasn't just a conflict of interest. It was a systematic transfer of wealth from blue-collar donors to a high-rise lifestyle in Washington, D.C. Every time a teacher or a nurse sent $50 to Omar's campaign, thinking they were fighting the establishment, they were actually funding first-class flights and upscale dinners for a woman who viewed them as nothing more than a source of revenue. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board had already seen through the smoke and mirrors, handing down fines that should have been the end of any normal politician's career. Gabbard highlighted the fact that Omar paid these fines without ever offering an explanation for why she was filing joint tax returns with one man while being legally married to another. This isn't just a personal mistake, as the radical left likes to claim. It is tax fraud and a blatant manipulation of the American legal system. In our country, if a regular citizen tried to claim two different husbands for tax purposes, they wouldn't be sitting in a committee room. They would be sitting in a jail cell. The double standard exhibited by the Squad and their defenders is a slap in the face to every law-abiding American who pays their taxes on time and follows the rules. As we dig deeper into these financial rabbit holes, it becomes clear why the establishment media tried so hard to protect her for so long. If you are as outraged as I am by this level of blatant corruption, then you need to be part of the solution. Please subscribe to this channel and share this video with your neighbors, your church groups, and your fellow veterans. We must build a community that demands the same accountability for members of Congress as we do for any other citizen. Comment below with the word corruption if you think it's time for a full independent audit of every member of the Squad. We cannot let these stories be buried by the 24-hour news cycle. We must keep the pressure on until justice is served. The implications of the marriage fraud allegations involving Ahmed Noor Said Elmi go far beyond a simple domestic scandal. If the evidence presented by Gabbard, the matching birth dates, the school records from Somalia, and the deleted social media posts is indeed true, then Omar committed multiple felonies to facilitate an illegal entry into the United States. This is a woman who advocates for open borders and the abolition of ICE. Yet she potentially used the very immigration system she hates to perform a fraudulent legal entry for her own brother. It is the ultimate form of elitism, believing that laws are for the little people, while the radical elite can invent their own rules as they go. Tulsi's demand for a DNA test was the moment of truth, and Omar's refusal to provide one was the loudest admission of guilt we have ever seen in American politics. Even as her office went into lockdown, the evidence continued to mount from investigators who had been tracking these irregularities for years. They found family photos where Elmi was referred to as uncle by Omar's children, and social media breadcrumbs that the Congresswoman's team had desperately tried to scrub from the internet. The level of deception required to maintain this lie for over a decade is staggering, and it speaks to a character that is fundamentally incompatible with the office of a United States representative. When Tulsi Gabbard stood on that stage and pointed out these discrepancies, she wasn't just attacking a political opponent. She was defending the integrity of the American citizenship that so many millions have worked honestly to achieve. The reaction from the men and women who have actually bled for the red, white, and blue was a deafening roar of approval that the mainstream media tried its best to ignore. Across the country, from the small-town VFW posts in the Midwest to the bustling American Legion halls in Florida, veterans gathered to watch the footage of Tulsi Gabbard standing her ground. For these patriots, this wasn't just a political debate. It was a long overdue defense of their sacred service against a woman who had spent years treating the American military as an enemy force. They remembered the friends they lost in the sands of the Middle East, and they saw those sacrifices being spat upon by Omar's "some people did something" rhetoric. The contrast between a lieutenant colonel who understands the cost of freedom and a radical politician who benefits from that freedom while mocking it was too stark to overlook. In the weeks following the debate, the Thank You Tulsi movement became a grassroots phenomenon that Washington elites simply couldn't handle. Veterans organized rallies and town halls, not to support a specific party, but to demand a basic level of respect for the oath they all took. They shared stories of serving in Somalia, the very country Omar fled, and described the chaos and brutality they fought to contain, only to be lectured by her about American imperialism. These soldiers saw the irony of a woman fleeing a failed state, being protected by the American military, and then using her platform in Congress to compare that same military to terrorist organizations like Hamas. It was a moment of profound cultural clarity for the silent majority who are tired of being told that their love for this country is somehow a form of bigotry. If you are one of the millions of Americans who feels a lump in your throat when the national anthem plays, then you know exactly why this fight matters. We are building a community here that doesn't apologize for loving America, and we want you to be a permanent part of it. Please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon so you are the first to know when we release new deep dives into Washington corruption. Comment below with the word patriot if you believe that anyone who serves in Congress should be required to pass a basic test on American history and the Constitution. Your support helps us show the world that the Squad does not speak for the heart and soul of this nation. We are moving into the final stages of Omar's public unraveling, and the next set of witnesses will leave you speechless. The divide within the Muslim American community also began to widen as more voices spoke out against Omar's radicalism. While progressive organizations tried to circle the wagons, moderate and conservative Muslim groups praised Gabbard for distinguishing between a peaceful faith and the radical ideology Omar seemed to excuse. Imams from across the country issued statements making it clear that Ilhan Omar does not represent the millions of hardworking, patriotic Muslims who love this country and reject anti-Semitism. They saw that her constant use of the Islamophobia card was actually hurting their community by making it seem as though their faith was a shield for corruption and anti-American sentiment. It was a powerful reminder that the radical left's attempt to use identity as a weapon is finally losing its edge. The international coverage of the debate even reached the streets of Mogadishu, where the people Omar claimed to represent were watching with a mix of curiosity and confusion. While she preached Somali nationalism from the comfort of her DC office, the people on the ground in Somalia saw a woman who had completely disconnected from the reality of their struggle. They saw a politician who used her heritage when it was convenient for a speech, but refused to lift a finger to help those terrorized by al-Shabaab. Tulsi Gabbard's pointed questions about "whose side are you on?" resonated even there, as people questioned why a member of the U.S. Congress seemed more interested in past grievances than in the future of the nation than actually gave her a voice. As the primary season approached, the energy on the ground in Minnesota's 5th District was unlike anything seen in decades. The Somali-American Marine veteran who stepped up to challenge Omar became a symbol of a new generation of immigrants who are proud to be American first. His campaign wasn't about identity politics. It was about service, integrity, and the idea that the American dream is something to be cherished, not torn down. Every dollar that flowed into his campaign was a vote of no confidence in the radicalism of the Squad. The debate hadn't just ended a career. It had started a movement to reclaim the meaning of representation in the heart of the Midwest. The investigative pressure on Ilhan Omar reached a fever pitch as international eyes turned toward the foggy streets of London and the digital archives of North Dakota. Watchdog organizations, emboldened by Tulsi Gabbard's fearlessness, began uncovering travel records that placed Omar and Ahmed Noor Said Elmi in the same cities during times when she claimed they had no contact. These were not just coincidences. They were data points in a decade-long pattern of deception. Anonymous witnesses, former associates who had been terrified of the Squad's social media mob, finally began to speak with investigators about the family dynamics they witnessed back in the early 2000s. They described a calculated effort to use the American legal system as a playground for personal gain, reinforcing the narrative that Omar viewed the United States not as a home to be protected, but as a resource to be exploited. As these documents surfaced, the political ground in Washington began to swallow what was left of Omar's credibility. The nonpartisan government oversight groups, which usually move at a snail's pace, were forced into high gear by the sheer volume of public outcry. They began looking into the specific dates of her religious and legal marriages, finding overlap that made a mockery of Minnesota's bigamy and fraud statutes. Every piece of paper confirmed what the patriots already knew. The radical left's poster child was built on a foundation of sand. While she was on television lecturing the American people about their privilege, she was allegedly committing multiple felonies to keep her own family's secrets buried in the past. The fight for our country's soul is happening right now, and the truth is our only weapon. If you are tired of watching politicians get away with things that would put any of us in prison, then you need to take a stand with us. Please subscribe to this channel and share this video on every social media platform you have. We need to reach the Americans who still think the mainstream media is giving them the full story. Comment below with the word integrity if you believe that any member of Congress found guilty of immigration fraud should face immediate deportation or imprisonment. Your support is what gives us the resources to keep digging where others are afraid to look. We are approaching the final moments of this investigation, and what the House Ethics Committee found will leave you outraged. Inside the Democratic Party, the purge of Ilhan Omar became a matter of political survival. Leadership realized that every day she remained on a committee was another day the Republicans could use her anti-American and anti-Semitic statements against the entire party. The memo went out. She was to be treated as a ghost. Her funding dried up as major donors, particularly those who were horrified by her Benjamin's comments, redirected their money to her primary challenger. The party that once celebrated her as a groundbreaking pioneer was now busy erasing her from their campaign brochures. It was a cold, calculated abandonment, proving that even in the world of radical politics, eventually, the truth becomes too expensive to ignore. The final blow to her public image came from the very place she felt most secure, the streets of Minneapolis. Local activists, who had once been her fiercest defenders, started demanding to see the birth certificates Tulsi Gabbard had challenged her to release. When the documents never appeared, the silence became the most damning evidence of all. The people of the 5th District realized they had been sold a version of the American dream that was actually a nightmare of corruption and divided loyalties. They saw a woman who spoke about the struggles of the poor while funneling millions to her consultant husband, and they decided they had seen enough. The era of the squad was not ending with a bang, but with a whimper of documented failure. As we look toward a future without the toxic influence of Ilhan Omar in our government, we must remember the lesson Tulsi Gabbard taught us on that Fox News stage. It is not enough to just disagree with radicalism. You must confront it with the facts, with the law, and with an unwavering love for the United States. We must demand that our leaders honor the oath they take, and we must hold them accountable when they treat our Constitution like a suggestion. This is the only way to ensure that our republic remains a beacon of hope for those who truly love freedom, rather than a sanctuary for those who seek to undermine it from within. The ripples from Tulsi Gabbard's stand did not stop at the edge of the political swamp. They traveled deep into the hearts of the next generation of American leaders. On college campuses and in young professional circles, where radicalism had once been the trendy status quo, a new movement began to take root, one based on the unapologetic love for the American experiment. Young patriots, who had long been bullied into silence by the squad's social media armies, found their voice in Tulsi's courage. They saw that you could be young, articulate, and diverse while still holding a profound respect for the flag and the Constitution. The victimhood narrative that Omar had so carefully cultivated was being replaced by a victory narrative, where the focus shifted from what America owes us to what we can do to protect the freedoms we've been given. Tulsi became the face of this new loyalty, traveling to universities to speak about the sacred nature of the oath she took as a soldier and a representative. She taught these young Americans that criticism of government is a right, but hatred for the country is a choice that disqualifies anyone from the privilege of leadership. The debates on campus shifted from identity politics to the fundamental principles of honesty and service. Students began to ask their own professors the same questions Tulsi asked Omar. Whose side are you on? It was a cultural reawakening that signaled the beginning of the end for the radical left's stranglehold on our educational institutions. As we witness this shift in our national consciousness, it's clear that the truth is starting to win. If you want to see a future where our children are taught to love America instead of resent it, then you must stay engaged in this fight. Please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you can share these stories with the younger generation in your family. Comment below with the word legacy if you believe that our leaders should leave this country better and more united than they found it. Your support ensures that the message of patriotism reaches every corner of the digital world, fighting back against the algorithms that prefer division over national pride. We are entering the final chapter of this historic era, and the legacy of this moment will define our country for decades to come. The legacy of Ilhan Omar, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale etched into the history books of political science. She became the primary example of what happens when a politician mistakes a loud social media presence for actual moral authority. Her downfall proved that while you can hide behind identity for a time, eventually, the weight of your own actions and words will catch up to you. The investigations into her marriage fraud and campaign finance irregularities provided a blueprint for how to hold the radical elite accountable. Follow the money, verify the documents, and never back down from a direct question. She left Washington not as a hero of the oppressed, but as a person who had exploited the very people she claimed to champion. The final irony was that the country Omar spent her life criticizing was the only one that provided the legal protections and due process she used to defend herself until the very end. In Somalia, or any of the other nations she refused to hold to the same standards as America, a politician with her record would never have seen a courtroom. They would have simply disappeared. By enjoying the full protection of the American legal system while trying to undermine its foundations, she proved Tulsi Gabbard's point one last time. America is the greatest nation on earth, not because our leaders are perfect, but because our system is strong enough to eventually purge the corruption that seeks to infect it. Looking forward, the Tulsi standard is now being applied to every candidate who seeks federal office. Voters are no longer satisfied with empty rhetoric or rehearsed talking points about diversity. They want to see the receipts. They want to know that when the pressure is on, their representative will stand with the American people and the American flag. The era of the anti-American representative is drawing to a close, replaced by a renewed demand for integrity, gratitude, and a clear understanding of the oath of office. We owe this shift to a combat veteran who refused to be silenced and a public that was brave enough to listen to the truth. The investigation into Ilhan Omar's conduct didn't stop at the borders of Minnesota. It followed the trail of her frequent and often unexplained foreign travels. While most representatives spend their recesses meeting with constituents, Omar was often found in the company of leaders from nations that have a complicated, if not hostile, relationship with American values. Tulsi Gabbard had hinted at these divided loyalties during their debate, and the discovery of the shadow files proved her intuition was, as always, surgical. Records emerged of high-level meetings in Qatar and Turkey, often funded by foreign entities, where the topics of discussion were far removed from the needs of the people in Minneapolis. These weren't diplomatic missions authorized by the State Department. They were private audiences with regimes that have been accused of backing the very extremist ideologies that our soldiers, like Tulsi, have fought to suppress. One of the most damning chapters in these files involved her 2022 trip to Pakistan, a journey that included a visit to the highly sensitive region of Azad Kashmir. Omar was seen standing alongside figures known for their radical rhetoric, appearing to validate their claims while ignoring the long-standing foreign policy of the United States. Back in Washington, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, from which she was eventually purged, had expressed private concerns about whether she was acting as a representative of America or as a freelance advocate for foreign interests. The documentation showed a pattern of selective outrage. She would fiercely condemn our Democratic allies while remaining strangely silent about the human rights abuses of the regimes that hosted her. The depth of this foreign influence became even more apparent when ethics investigators looked into the funding of her fact-finding missions. Disclosure reports revealed that the Qatari government had picked up the tab for luxury lodging and travel during her visit to the World Cup trip, taken while she was simultaneously attacking other nations for the same kind of lobbyist influence she was now enjoying. This was the Benjamin's hypocrisy coming full circle. For a politician who built her brand on being a truth-teller who challenged the establishment, she seemed remarkably comfortable being wined and dined by foreign monarchs who suppress the very civil liberties she claims to champion at home. As these international ties come to light, it is clear that the swamp has many layers, some of which reach far beyond our shores. If you believe that a United States representative should be loyal to the American people and no one else, then you must join us in demanding a full investigation. Please subscribe to this channel and help us spread this truth to every patriot who still believes in the sanctity of our government. Comment below with the word sovereignty if you think foreign governments should have zero influence over our elected officials. Your support is the only thing that keeps us independent and able to bring you these hidden stories. We are entering the final analysis of the Omar era, and the conclusion is one that Washington will never be able to forget. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when intelligence analysts noted the timing of her legislative pushes in relation to her foreign visits. Shortly after returning from meetings with Turkish officials, Omar became one of the few voices in Congress to oppose sanctions on Turkey, even as they were being accused of atrocities against our Kurdish allies. It was a move that baffled her colleagues, but made perfect sense to those who had seen the shadow files. She wasn't just a Somali first politician. She had become a global advocate for an ideology that views America as the problem and its enemies as the victims. Tulsi Gabbard saw it, the veterans saw it, and finally, the American people were seeing it too. The mask of the refugee-turned-reformer had been replaced by the face of a foreign agent in the halls of power. The exposure of the shadow files was the final nail in the coffin for Ilhan Omar's credibility, but it was also the catalyst for a monumental shift in the American spirit. As we stand on the precipice of the nation's 250th anniversary in 2026, the era of performative partisan showboating is being replaced by a genuine hunger for national service and a rebirth of traditional American values. This isn't just about the downfall of one politician. It's about a grand reckoning where the American people are finally waking up and demanding that their leaders actually love the country they represent. Tulsi Gabbard's trajectory from that Fox News stage to her confirmation as the Director of National Intelligence in early 2025 has redefined the gold standard for public service. She has proven that America First doesn't mean isolationism, but rather a commitment to peace through realism and the courage to engage directly with both allies and adversaries. Her rise has inspired a Project 2026 movement, led by veterans and patriots who are determined to restore fiscal discipline, curb the influence of corporate money, and return to constitutional limits on military engagement. We are seeing a shift away from the divisive culture wars of the past toward a unified focus on sovereignty, border security, and the protection of the American family. The 250th anniversary celebrations in 2026 are set to be more than just a party. They are a symbolic conflation of patriotism with conservative traditionalism, aimed at instilling pride in the hearts of all Americans once again. We are reclaiming our history from those who wish to rewrite it as inherently flawed, restoring our national monuments to their rightful place as symbols of inspiration rather than shame. This is the rebirth that Mike Bettenbaugh and other veterans have called a bottom-up approach where citizens have faith in each other and in the Federalist principles that made this nation great in the first place. As we head into the 2026 midterms, the message is clear. The American people will no longer tolerate leaders who use their office as a piggy bank or a platform for foreign interests. We want representatives who understand that democratic citizenship betokens civic responsibilities and that national service should be a universal expectation. If you are ready to see a Washington that honors the oath and a country that celebrates its extraordinary heritage, then your journey starts here. Please subscribe to this channel and join us as we document this historic restoration of the American Republic. Comment below with the word rebirth to show you are ready for a 2026 where the truth is finally the law of the land. The story of the Omar-Gabbard debate will be remembered as the moment the light finally broke through the darkness. It showed us that documentation defeats deflection, that facts overcome identity politics, and that the American spirit is far more resilient than the radicals ever imagined. Tulsi Gabbard asked, "Whose side are you on?" And because she had the courage to ask, the American people finally found the strength to answer. We are on the side of the Constitution, the side of the veterans, and the side of a future where every representative is an American first, last, and always.